What's up, guys? JD here, and on today's show, I am talking with Ryan Hanley of The Ryan Hanley Show. If you're a podcast listener, you may know Ryan because he's got like the eighth biggest entrepreneurship podcast in America. Top of the business charts, top of the podcast charts. And you know something? He is a ball of energy, and you're going to get that in this episode. We get into mindset, we get into failures, we get into success, we get into the laws of power. It is a wide-ranging interview, and we're going to get into the tactics also. I love talking to Ryan. He has got so much energy, and I think you guys are really, really going to like this. If you're new here, my name's Jon Davids. I am the author of Marketing Superpowers, Build a Brand So Good That Getting Customers Feels Like Magic, which dropped last week as I'm recording this and debuted as an instant Amazon #1 bestseller in the marketing category. So thank you all for grabbing the book. If you haven't gotten it yet, go to marketingsuperpowersbook.com to get it. It's on Amazon, Kindle, audiobook, wherever you want to listen. Go grab it and let me know what you think. Of course, get on my email list at jondavids.com. Follow me across social. And now let's get into my conversation with Ryan Hanley. Ryan, you have been fired from almost every job you've had, it sounds like. And I can relate to you because I'm in the same boat, fired from most companies I ever worked for that weren't my own. Tell me your story. Fired 6 days after breaking records in the insurance industry. What happened?
Yeah, I'll give the audience just a little bit of context. So my industry that I came out of, I don't primarily work just in the insurance industry anymore, but really the industry that molded me into an entrepreneur, executive, et cetera, that I am today was the insurance industry, and specifically the property casualty insurance industry. And I got into it like most people do. They fall into it. No one chooses property casualty insurance. It's not sexy at all, although it is an incredible career and industry. There's so much opportunity. It was basically the dowry for my ex-wife's hand in marriage. She's not my ex-wife at the time, but it was basically the dowry for her hand in marriage, right? So I asked her father for his blessing, and he essentially says, yes, if you come and work for me and sell insurance for my insurance agency. And for 8 years, I learned how to sell insurance, and I was really, really shitty at it, like terrible. And a year in, he fired me from that position. And like any self-respecting young man would do, I got literally down on my knees and said, please do not do this. I don't want to have to go home to your little girl and tell her that you just fired me. And you don't want to have to take a phone call from her about why you fired me. I said, give me another chance. I'll pick my performance up.
Okay, that story is way better than I thought it was going to be. You were fired by your father-in-law who forced you to come work for him?
Yes, yeah. Because I hated at that time, what's funny is now I have no problem with these things. But at that time, cold calling, I was putting 50,000 miles on my car. Now, this is 2005, 2006. This is pre-internet, right? So there's no real internet marketing. Like these things are infancy. I mean, we just, a few years before we had the big .com crash. So like I'm doing all hand-to-hand combat analog sales and I hated it. I felt like I was interrupting people's lives. I hated it. And I was terrible at it. So when I made this bargain with him to give me another shot, I knew I had to figure something else out. So this is now like a year in, call it 2007, 2008. And so basically the internet was starting to come around. LinkedIn was a thing, blogging was a thing, et cetera. And I said, there has to be something to this digital side of the business because I'm so terrible. And what I've always been is a good storyteller. I've always been fine on camera and talking to people. I've never had a problem sharing, being authentic and transparent. I've never had a problem with these things. So digital became a natural place for me. So what I started doing back in 2007, 2008 was literally just answering the common questions that I got from prospects and customers, answering them in blog posts and putting them online. And it completely changed my career. And in 2011, I started a YouTube channel, which ultimately I got to almost 400,000 views a year. That became the largest insurance-focused YouTube channel in the entire world. It was generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue every year for that agency, and it was a tremendous experience. 8 years in, my brother-in-law at the time walks into my office. This is 8 years in. I'm driving all this business, creating all this content. Walks in and says, would you rather make $300,000 a year or own a piece of this agency? And my answer was, I would prefer to own a piece of the agency because I know how to make money. If I have skin in the game, there's much more upside long-term. Because at that time, I didn't see myself going anywhere. And his response to me was, okay, you need to know you will never own a piece of this agency. Quote unquote, your name will never be on the box. If you ever do own the agency, it will be through your wife, and you need to be okay with that, which obviously I wasn't. So 2 months later, I quit because I got offered a job as the chief marketing officer for a large technology company in the insurance space. It was more money than I ever made in my life. It was this national role. I'm traveling all over the country, and most people won't know who I am who are listening to this. I came from this tiny little crappy town in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York. We used to say you could leave your doors open because the criminals lived in our town. They didn't rob in our town. So I didn't come from anything. My mom was a receptionist. My dad was a mechanic. When I was offered this CMO job, it was like, oh my God, I'm rich. You know what I mean? And so I went in head first, and it was a tremendous experience.
How old were you at the time that you were offered the CMO job?
31 or 32, somewhere around there. It was everything that I could have hoped it would have been. It was just, solving big problems, working on a national basis. I'm going to the 42nd floor of all these insurance carriers that everyone's heard of and talking to CEOs of, Dow Jones 30 companies. And it was awesome. And what I did there was, and this will ultimately get to your very first question of how I was fired from this company. When I got there, they had no way to speak to their customer base. Their primary product was actually a lead generation business where they ran the most effective SEO strategy at the time for insurance lead generation. And they then distributed it out to thousands of independent insurance agents throughout the country. The problem was their website was consumer facing, not who ultimately paid their bills, which were the independent agents. So there was no real way to market or tell stories to the actual insurance agents in the industry. So I created a sister company called Agency Nation, which was a media platform and media company that basically did content marketing to our customer base. It told agent stories, best practices, marketing tactics, sales tactics, all these kinds of things. And in 4 years, we built that from literally zero. And how we started it. And this just, one of my philosophies in life is just fucking do it. Just start the thing. We get so caught up in what if it's this, what if it's that? So how this company formed is my second week on the job. I'm sitting after, I'm in Minneapolis where the company was headquartered, and I'm sitting with the CTO. We're at the bar. We're having a couple beers, just kind of ruminating over the day. And I was bitching at him. I'm like, how are we going to tell our story? How are we going to let people know what we do besides this email list that we have? That was literally their only way of marketing, was sending out emails. And while at that time it was mildly effective, there was no place for them to go other than the email. There was no repository of information that they could go and learn about us. So he looks at me and he goes, and I say we're having a couple beers. It's 11 o'clock at night and we're probably shit-faced is probably a better way of putting it. And again, I was younger, don't do a lot of that stuff today, but again, this is 11, 12 years ago. So he looks at me and he goes, well, I got this URL that I bought a couple of months ago called Agency Nation. And I was like, holy shit, that's brilliant. Let's go. So we pound our beers, pay our check, 11 o'clock at night. We walk back into the office. We install WordPress. I walk and put just a free template on the website. I walk back to my hotel room and, like I said, shit-faced, I write the first blog post for Agency Nation and launch it the next day. 4 years later, we're doing more than 500,000 eyeballs. We have a YouTube channel that is generating, I think we were doing on average 3,000 to 5,000 views per video. We're talking specifically the insurance industry. There's only 500,000 people in this entire industry, right? So we are killing the game. And
And this is crazy because what you're talking about here is really, really boring content, frankly, but people that are interested in it are going to be glued to it because that kind of scale, you probably had a pretty niche audience.
Dude, if you started reading it, like your brain would melt. You'd be like, this is awful. What did I do wrong? And why is God punishing me? But for this particular industry, they loved it, right? So, so now fast forward 2017, we want to take all this attention we have, and at this time, we are the voice. Like we have come out of nowhere. We are getting, we're doing, I think, our podcast platform, we had 3 podcasts. Our podcast platform was getting 40,000 downloads a month combined. Our YouTube channel is doing close to 50,000 views a month. And our blog is doing close to 100,000 views a month, specifically talking to property casualty insurance agents. These are those dumpy looking buildings that you drive past on every main street in the country, right? So like, it's just going incredibly well. So we decided to have an in-person conference, 315 people in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is revolutionary. I come out and do the opening monologue, 12 minutes, and all my slides were Star Wars GIFs. So I had 47 Star Wars GIFs timed to my message. So each GIF, I didn't speak to any of the GIFs, but with each like thing that I said, I would flip the thing and it would be a GIF that kind of captured that thought. It was incredible. And that conference goes off amazing. And we're like, all right, we have to do this again. So fast forward now another year. Now it's 2018. And this conference, we have 825 people at. It's at the Hilton downtown in Cleveland, Ohio. And we went to tier 2 and tier 3 cities because they were cheaper. It's just an absolute and utter success in every regard. I mean, we have just tailored music and light, and like putting on events is something that I just.
Are you doing it yourself? Are you planning the venue and the entertainment?
Me and one other person in-house. And then we hired outsourced people to help us do some of the other stuff, like the lighting piece and the music. And, it took us a year to do it. I mean, it was a big ordeal, but went off phenomenally well. Okay. I'm fired 6 days after that conference.
Okay. What happened in that 6-day period?
The actual event that got me fired was the CEO, 6 days later, sends out an email to a board member of the organization and says, so the way I craft events is narrative driven. So every speaker built on the next speaker. So at the end of the 2 days, it's not just random people placed throughout the event. We've taken you through a journey to where you now have in front of you, if you've taken notes from all these speakers, you now have a branding strategy, a sales strategy, a marketing strategy, and it all ties together. So you literally have a battle plan to take home to go conquer, not just like speakers throwing shit at you. These are like legit, every speaker builds off each other. We had speakers that people had never heard of before. We had pulled in people, the insurance industry is not known for being culturally or gender diverse. So we had, people from all different backgrounds, ethnicities. We had a ton of females, which is not common for the industry.
You were doing DEI before that was a thing. And
yes,
it was a crescendo of information so that at the very end you had a climax.
Yes, which everyone loves a good climax. So so I leave, I'm on cloud 9, and then I get this email in my inbox that basically says this boring, old, stodgy fart is going to be on center stage at 2019. And I emailed him. I'm like, no, he's not. And he's like, and my CEO pushes back on me. And I was like, this is unacceptable. Like, the reason this conference was so good is because we did not put old farts on stage like every other freaking insurance conference because they want to stroke their ego. Like, he has nothing to add. And he fired me for insubordination. Okay. Now let's break down what actually happened. So that is the event that got me fired. The lead up to that is the actual reason. And what happened was now, if anyone's ever read The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, I highly recommend that you stop what you're doing after you finish this podcast and start reading that book. I broke rule number 1, never outshine the master. So I was the CEO, not the CEO. However, I was the front-facing person for the organization in every regard. In every interview about what we were doing, in every podcast about what we were doing. I mean, I'm creating Casey Neistat style vlog videos of all my travels. I mean, I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it, and I want to be clear. I don't mean this. I know this sounds like, I don't want this to sound humble braggy in any way. I wasn't doing this for my own popularity. I could honestly give a shit about that. This is what needed to be done. I had brought in other creators as well. So it wasn't just me, but I was the most forward-facing person. And he started to feel like he was being outshined or whatever. And then I made a comment. So I tend to be a very hard-charging guy. I just like to solve problems. I don't care who solves a problem. I don't care whose idea it is. I just like to get shit done. So I was in an executive leadership meeting 3 months before the conference, in which our CFO was bitching about our retention. Bitching. I owned new business sales and all of marketing and all of Agency Nation. I had 19 people reporting to me at the time. There were 3 people on the retention team. And he's bitching about it. And he'd been bitching about it for like 6 months. And finally I go, just give me the fucking team. I will solve this problem. I have a woman inside my team currently who can run that department. We will solve this in 2 months. Just give me the fucking team. Like, stop bitching. Like, I had a moment of pure frustration.
This was to the CEO.
He's on the call, but I said this to the CFO. So a year later, after I get fired, I get a phone call from the CEO. I haven't talked to him since the day he fired me. And he needs something. He needs me to sign something. So he needs something from me. So I take this moment to basically vent my frustration on him because I don't give a fuck because I don't work for him anymore. And we have this hour-long just cursing each other up and down for an hour on the telephone. It was like, I don't know, I don't know if this happens to ladies, but with a lot of guys who play sports, for some reason, your best friend ends up being someone you've had a physical altercation with. I don't know what it is. Like, you just, like somebody who you just, for some reason, you can't stand them and then you fight, like physically fight. And all of a sudden you become best friends and inseparable. Like,
I think that's actually pretty well known in sort of ancient culture, that it's a bonding experience. After you fight with somebody, you wrestle. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, my best friend in high school, for my sophomore, junior, and senior year of high school, was a guy that in sophomore year basketball practice, we literally went to blows. Like, we're both bleeding. We're fighting on the floor in the middle of practice. Now, this is a long time ago, so our coach just watched and laughed. And when we were done, he said, okay, let's get back to the drill. Like, but when we were done and like exhausted, we literally slapped each other up, bro hugged each other, and we're inseparable for the next 3 years. Inseparable. Like, he was my best friend. So we have this drag out, knockout fight. And finally, I just say to him, how about this? I'll stop being an asshole to you. You stop being an asshole to me. And how about we just be friends? And he goes, that sounds great. I go, so why did you actually fire me? And he goes, I thought you were coming after my job.
Wow.
And everything made sense at that point. And I was like, his name is Chip. I said, Chip, I want you to know, dude, up until the moment you fired me, I had nothing but the ultimate respect for you. And I never wanted your job. You're the politics guy. You were so good with the board and investors and, you were the best at that. Like, you were like a mentor to me. I was like, I wasn't coming after your job. I loved my job. I was the CMO. Like, I got to create content and build marketing programs and sell shit. And what I learned was from that, a couple things. One, power laws are real. And I did outshine the master. I didn't make it clear to him that I knew my role. And he took certain comments that I made as just someone who was trying to get shit done as trying to take his position. And I should have communicated that more. And at the point at which he fired me, I should have stopped that conversation and tried to get to the root of what was really going on, because I knew the fact that I didn't want this old fart on stage was not the real reason that I was being fired. But I did not have the emotional depth at that moment to to understand that. So that was a transcendent experience for me that changed my leadership style and changed me as a person.
All right, dude, you just handed me a Las Vegas Caesar's Palace buffet of grab bag to dig into because there's so much there, and I want to get into a bunch of it. So a couple things that shine off. So first of all, just so the audience knows, we're at 19 minutes and 20 seconds of recording. This dude is a machine of content. Like, and you're an amazing storyteller, and I can see exactly why you are somebody who would go into a business, and you've done it multiple times now, and say, we need to use content and community and energy and narrative and all these things to draw attention because you're really good at that. You're a complete natural and you're so interesting to listen to. The other thing is how you kind of you're very self-reflective. The fact that you could go through an experience like that and take yourself out of it and then have a really interesting. Did it take, I don't know, a therapy, a business coach? I mean, did you realize that yourself, these lessons that you just outlined,
So,
or yeah?
yeah, so yes. So up until 2017, I was not. So I've always been highly interested in psychology. I have a math degree from the University of Rochester, but if I could go back and do it again, I probably would be like a psychology or philosophy double major with economics. The only reason I'm a math major is because I flunked out of engineering school. And it was the only thing I could graduate on time with because I had taken too many engineering classes. So, so I've always been interested in how people think, how our brains work, how we're motivated, et cetera. And I've always been a high performer. I played college baseball, captained a lot of teams, all that kind of stuff. But in 2017, at the first conference that we did, I was 20 pounds heavier than I am today. I did not take care of myself. Was not feeding my brain. I did not put a focus on personal development. I did not put a focus on learning how to be a better leader, et cetera. So at the end of that conference, I was the MC. I told you I did the opening monologue to the Star Wars gifts, which was cool. But other than that, I just introduced people the rest of the conference. I didn't want the conference to be about me. People had heard enough from me in the content that we created for the Agency Nation platform. They didn't need to hear from me from stage. I wanted to showcase other people. So the closing keynote was meant to be a fireside chat with me and this guy who was really into programmatic ads, which at that time was a very big thing, and et cetera. And he was uncomfortable going up alone, which is the only reason it was supposed to be a fireside. So I get to that thing and I'm dead. Like, I have my mental, I had not put my body and my mind in a place that I could handle 2 days of intensive work like that. And I get to this closing keynote and we're about to walk out on stage and I look at him, I'm like, I'm not sure I can do it. Like, when I say I'm dying, I'm literally like barely able to get up off the floor. And I said, dude, you may have to do this by yourself. And he goes, well, let's try. So I get out there, we sit in these chairs and I look at him and I mouth the words, I can't go. And thank God that he understood and he stood up. And I just said, the last thing I said to the audience was, it looks like Michael is going to take this one. You're in for a treat, right? And I just sat in the chair and I almost passed out in the chair. And afterwards, I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. I took that experience. Like, I went and saw a doctor because I was like, what, is something wrong with me? Like, whatever. And it was just that mentally, physically, energy, I hadn't done any of the work to put myself in a position to be able to perform at that high of a level for that long. And that spurred me to go down the path that I continue to be on today, which is around personal excellence, personal development, et cetera. I read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life was the first book that I read. And then now I read, I probably read a book a week, probably at this point, maybe every other week, depending on my schedule. But I have just dived deep into this stuff. And one of the first things that you learn if you follow Jordan Peterson is it's success. So much of our success in life is based on awareness, not awareness of our situation, although that's very important. It's awareness of who we are. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where are the places that and this is a really hard thing to learn. What are the weaknesses that are worth working on? And what are the weaknesses that we just need to accept and outsource?
Can I just tell you on that note, because that what you just said resonates so strongly. And there's so much, I call it entrepreneur porn, hustle culture, all the stuff, all the information you can get information from, Elon Musk, and let's look at what Bezos does, and let's look at what Gary Vee does, and let's look at what Grant Cardone does. And all these people will give advice very freely, and they'll say it with such authority and such confidence that you believe them. And I think the point you just made, I want people to rewind and listen to that again, because it is the master key to figuring this all out, and that is self-awareness. So what works for me is what works for me. If you are 99% like me, it might work for you too. But if you're 86% like me and the other 14% is really important, my advice is not going to work for you. A really clear example of this, like, it's so binary, is should you build a business that is venture capital backed and you're aiming for an exit? Or should you build a business that is, more of a small business, cash flow, dividend out the cash, more of what they call a lifestyle business, which frankly could be a way bigger business than a VC business to an entrepreneur. But like, for me to say, go out and raise capital to somebody who just wants to live off the cash flow would be terrible advice. So self-awareness is key.
Yeah, it's paramount. I don't know how you can progress as an individual, whether you're considering your relationship to your kids, your spouse, your employees, your friends, competitors, peers, vendors, whatever. If you're not aware of who you are, you're not going to be able to grow, or you're not going to be able to grow in an intentional way in a direction that you choose, right? And to me, we outsource our growth because we're not self-aware, right? If you bump into someone and get lucky, you're like, oh, well, he had a great mentor, so he's lucky. Or she met so-and-so and they took them under their wing and that's how they got to where they are. And it's like, yeah, maybe luck is part of that, but you could be super intentional too. Like, if there's somebody out there who you think could be an incredible mentor or coach for you, have you reached out to them? Have you added some value to them? Have you tried to become part of their organization? Like, but we don't do that. We just assume that we are who we are, and then we just outsource our thought processes. Look at how polarized our world is and our society is on everything, not just politics today. It's because we just outsource our viewpoints and our thoughts to other people. Well, talking head, AB, whoever told me that this is what's happening, and so therefore that must be what's happening. Like, my girlfriend made me watch Tonight with John Oliver, and he did this whole thing on Trump. And I'm not saying you're a Trump supporter or not Trump supporter. I literally don't care, nor do I even want to talk about politics. But I do follow politics. I find it very interesting. I'll keep my personal political persuasions out of the way.
We'll get to it, man. We'll get to it.
Yeah, I'm listening to what he's saying, and in an effort to be funny, he misrepresented and/or shared complete and utter misinformation about. I went back and I made her rewind it, which she hated me for 12 times. 12 times he either misrepresented or was just outright sharing something that's been debunked to be funny. Now, granted, it was funny. He delivered it in a hilarious way, and it was very entertaining. Don't get me wrong, but I was just like, if someone's watching this and they think he's being honest, they're being completely and utterly misinformed. Now, he does the same shit about Joe Biden too. So I'm not saying this isn't a Trump, Biden, whatever. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have to be independent, and critical thinking and self-awareness are paramount, right? If we are aware of who we are, our strengths, our weaknesses, our beliefs, and then we think critically and independently about topics, this is how we grow as people. It's how we become better leaders, better entrepreneurs, better spouses, better parents, better friends, etc. It is the only way. If you do not know who you are and you do not think critically and independently, then you are essentially just kind of floating through life and letting whatever tide catches you drive you in a direction, whether you like it or not. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're 45 years old and you hate your fucking life, and you divorce the woman who's loved you for 15 years and go buy a Porsche and start dating a 21-year-old. And that's even more miserable than you were before. And you're like, what happened to my life?
I think you and I have a bit of an unfair advantage here because we come from a world of media content, as you said earlier, perception, psychology. So there's something very specific you hit on, and that is take John Oliver or Jon Stewart or Stephen Colbert, insert your comedian here, And what they're doing is using comedy to make a point. And whether or not it's a point they believe in or they just want to cater to a certain audience, irrelevant. The point is they're using comedy, which is a form of influence, which allows you to be more susceptible to whatever they're saying. And there's other forms of this too. When you're scrolling social media and you see somebody with a microphone like I have right here, it conveys authority. When you see somebody on a stage and that stage doesn't have a 10-foot ceiling, but it has a 30-foot ceiling, we convey authority. When I see somebody and they do a panning shot and there's a big crowd and they're speaking, it's a signal of authority. And so, and cable news, there's so many examples of this. You need to be so perceptive these days if you don't want to float through life and just be hypnotized by strangers to what people are saying. Push aside the packaging that they're wrapping it in, the microphone, the stage, the humor, the whatever. Do you believe in the point they're making? Because if you don't, you can be swept down a path. And we see this happening on university campuses. We see this happening in the streets. We see it all over the place because people are just swept into these movements that they may not actually fundamentally agree with. And that's also why I'm somebody who doesn't really rush to judgment because someone says something off the snap or because they showed up there. Oh, they believe this, they believe that. Listen, I believe people are actually much more likely to fall into a scenario where they maybe say something or feel something because they were actually told it by somebody else and they're just repeating it. So I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but the point for the listener is so that you don't float through life and just become a cog in somebody else's machine. Awareness is the key. Understand what you're being told.
So I was listening to you and I was looking over here because I wanted to pull something up that I wanted to share with you that I pulled up before our conversation because I think I thought it might be relevant to this conversation. So Adam Grant just wrote a book called Think Again. And in that book, he outlines 4 types of thinkers. And he, the preacher, the prosecutor, the politician, and the scientist. And I just want to get it right. So that's why I have it up over here for anyone who's watching on YouTube. The preacher is always right and believes intrinsically in what they're doing and uses that influence and that authority of speech to convey a message to you. Okay. The prosecutor uses a similar tact, except they're trying to prove people wrong. Where the preacher is trying to prove why they're right, the prosecutor is always trying to prove why someone else is wrong using the same authoritative methods. The politician will say whatever needs to be said to get to their goal. The 4th type, and what Grant outlines as the most productive and positive type, is what he calls the scientist. Someone who is seeking truth, but has the humility to be wrong.
But let me ask you a question on that. I agree with you. I love that explanation. Don't you get clobbered in pop culture and don't you get clobbered in society for thinking like a scientist and letting your opinions change?
Yes. So I have back on for anyone who's watching back here, I have a wood structure that one of my subscribers to the podcast sent me, which I love my audience and blessed for them. He created this thing in his wood shop. It's a piece of wood and it says GNF, give no fucks. Like, if you're going to create content online, you cannot care about the haters. It doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to them, right? But we should be swayed by people who are willing to have a debate with us, who are willing to communicate with us and come from a standpoint of as a good actor. And I will share with you one of the most popular episodes, one of the most listened to and download episodes I've ever had on my podcast is a conversation that I had with a friend of mine. So it's probably obvious I tend to skew a little more conservative in politics, and he tends to skew a little more left. And a wonderful guy. I love him to death. And we did a podcast called How to Have a Disagreement About Politics with a Friend and Still Love Each Other. And in this conversation, it was a true debate. I mean, we were talking, we brought up 3 or 4 different topics, and he approached it from his angle, and I approached it from his angle. And what was amazing was, on a couple of those things, he actually conceded a little bit to me. On a couple of those topics, I conceded a little bit to him. And what we realized, and this is the truth, guys, and why we have to be so careful of preachers, prosecutors, and politicians, is that we were both we both wanted the same result. At the end of the day, we were both aiming for the same thing. And in having an honest and good-natured debate, we were able to find the places that we agreed, find the places that we didn't necessarily agree and probably wouldn't. And we found some places where we were both willing to concede some points and actually skew towards the other. That is how we reframe and continue to grow. Giving a shit about what some troll in your comments says because you had an opinion, did more research, and changed your mind, that person can go fuck themselves.
I love it. And you know what? That advice is so timely for anybody making content online, for anybody who wants to have a voice today that is public facing. You really have to just remind yourself it's very easy to sit in the cheap seats and use your thumbs to throw stones at somebody. But if you're in the ring, that is the person who's actually getting somewhere. You know, it kind of reminds me of something. You mentioned this a few minutes ago, and I wanted to say something about it. I was talking with a colleague of mine a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about somebody we both know in the industry, in the media industry. I won't say who it is, but you know, her comment to me was, "Oh, that person has sort of gone through their career only because they've been surrounded by other teammates, and now this person's like the vice president of marketing at some big company." And her point was like, "Oh, but you know, he's only successful because of the people he surrounds himself with, and you know, he himself is not that talented." And I thought to myself, after we had this conversation, I thought, you know, that is a completely twisted way to go through life. First of all, this guy is successful. Stop there. He is successful. Okay, period. End of story. And he's successful because he surrounded himself with other people who have the talents that he lacks. Brilliant. Great. Yes. Goes back to your point before about what weaknesses are not even worth working on because you can find others to fill the gap. If you are self-aware enough, and as you say, you don't give a fuck about what someone else thinks. Like, I know that I'm not that good at math, so I'm going to hire somebody. I'm not going to be embarrassed that I'm bad at math. I'm going to you know, fill that in with somebody else. It's very easy to throw stones at somebody who is on stage and is not a great speaker, or somebody who is on the field but is not great at throwing the ball. But hey, they are out there doing it. They're the ones who are actually getting it done. So who are you to sit in the cheap seats and make fun of them and knock on them?
So let's reframe that comment in a way that allows us to actually grow as individuals, right? So instead of saying, as you outlined, this person's only successful because who they surrounded themselves with, how you reframe that in a way that you can actually grow from that is, wow, look how talented this individual is at bringing in high performers, getting them to buy into a mission and or a project and achieve amazing results. I wonder what I can learn from that person about surrounding myself with amazing, talented people that complement my weaknesses and allow my team, my project, whatever goal I have, my mission to be more successful, right? So by reframing that from, you know, oh, this person's only this because of this, right? What that says is I have insecurities about my ability to draw in high performers and my ability to lead high performers. That's what that person's really saying. And oftentimes, guys, like, we learn the most from the people we disagree the most with. Like at this point, and this is taking me time, right? This isn't something you just like have intrinsically. I didn't have it intrinsically. I had to learn this, right? I actually today seek out people who are incredibly successful that I disagree with and try to study them as much or more than the people I agree with, because they've been able to create a message that I don't think is right. However, they're incredibly successful in sharing that message. So there are things we can learn from them. There are ways that we can grow. And I do honestly believe most people at their core are good people trying to get to a solution. They just take different tacks. And just because we don't agree with someone's tact or someone's message does not mean that we can't find ways to frame what they're doing to be positive and growth experiences for us. And this is, you know, resentment, jealousy, these things, they're real, but they are not helping us in any way. They're not helping us get better. They're literally roadblocks or curtains to seeing clearly how we grow as individuals. And, you know, that's very important, I think.
It's so true. It's so true. So we've covered so much on mindset, and I absolutely love it because I think people are really going to be energized and hopefully get themselves into the right place. But you are also, as I said in the intro, one of the top business entrepreneurship podcasters in the world. So why don't we close out here in the last 10 minutes or so with some real good nuggets, strategies, like making content today. You've done this for over a decade. You've made content in the most boring industries and
Yeah.
you've made it interesting. Talk about making content specifically for the business owners who want to grow a business, build a brand, generate more revenue. Like, how do you do it on podcast? How do you do it on YouTube? How do you do it wherever you see opportunity right now?
Yeah. So I'll give just a little frame to what I'm about to say. I gave you a bunch of experiences that I had. I've done all this again in the fitness industry as well. I was a CEO of a 6-location fitness franchise for a year. And then I was fired from that job too. That was actually, I'll make this very short. That was very interesting. Came in, the founder of that business came to me and said, hey, I'm a gym guy. I'm not a business guy. I want to take this concept and grow it regionally. And then if it hits, potentially nationally. And I need a business guy to do that. So I'd like you to become the CEO. I will remain founder, but I'm just going to work on the gym stuff, like the workout program and experience UX in the gym. But I need someone to grow the business. So I came in. We went from 2,100 members to 3,200 members in 11 months. And we were the number one mentioned company in our geographic region for that period of time, media-wise, both online and in print and on TV. And we were growing like crazy. And I was sitting at our 8:30 Monday morning meeting. I'm in Lululemon gear because the best part about being the CEO of a fitness business is part of your job is working out at noon every day. So I literally just worked out for a living. It was amazing. And he showed up in a 3-piece suit with his attorney, and I knew something was wrong. And he sat down. He said, you've done an amazing job. I appreciate everything you've done. Unfortunately, you've made the business so profitable that I no longer want to put the work in to grow. So I'm firing you today because you're my biggest expense. Have a nice day. That was it. Last words he ever spoke to me.
You have this constant track record of getting fired for being too good, literally.
And that makes me a little cringy because I don't love the like too good part. But you know, look, I'm going to get to the actual tactical stuff for you now. So when I walked out of that meeting, I realized I'm not a great employee or whatever it is about me. I don't work. I need to be the owner. So I started an independent insurance agency that I had kind of been mapping in my head for almost a decade. And it was called Rogue Risk. We were fully virtual. We focused only on small business insurance, and we were national. And we basically took digital marketing and SaaS sales processes and theories, concepts, et cetera, but we applied them to the independent insurance space and particularly the small business space. And I launched 7 days before COVID hit. So I have about $56,000 invested into launching this business because as much as it might sound crazy, launching an insurance agency is actually really expensive. And 7 days later, the entire world shuts down. And while I had about a month of darkness because like everyone else, no one knew what was going on. And I'm also just lighting money on fire because no one's answering the phone. After that month of kind of down, I got to work doing what works. I just started creating content. And what that looked like was every single day, every single weekday, I took the weekends off from posting, although I pretty much worked 16 hours a day at that point because it was a new business. Every single weekday, I posted a video 5 minutes or less answering a common question around small business insurance on YouTube. These are very, very basic and straightforward stuff. This is the foundational content that every single business should have. Every single business should have this content. This is not flashy. It's not fun. It's work. It's a grind. And it went like this. Today, we're going to answer the question, what is the best commercial general liability for a barbershop? Then I had a simple logo bump that I got off of Fiverr that was 7 seconds long. And then I would come back and I'd say, hi, my name is Ryan Hanley. I'm the founder and president of Rogue Risk, where we do insurance differently, specifically by giving you knowledge and information to make the right insurance decision. Now, the best commercial insurance is, and then I'd give them the answer under 5 minutes. At the end, I'd say, if this is the type of relationship you'd like to have with your insurance professional, you can give us a call at insert number. You can visit us online, or I'm sure there's a button or link somewhere around this video that will let you contact us. Whatever you choose, we look forward to working with you. Done.
Did you make that content because it was highly searchable, because those questions are being searched and you knew you'd pop up in the results?
There were two reasons. One, I believe that we are not the gatekeepers of information about our business, and that if you hold the intrinsic knowledge about your business back, you are doing a disservice to your client base. So I am the jab, 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 right hook. It's more like jab, 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 right hook, right? So like, I wanted to be able to have the library of information about my industry and my business, so that anyone who was searching anything about a commercial insurance product would find my YouTube channel and or my website, because I reposted all this, and we can talk tactics about how I did it, but reposted them all as LinkedIn posts. And we had this kind of 3-week strategy where I would post a YouTube video, say on a Monday. The following Monday, we would take and we would get the YouTube video transcribed and then kind of rework it into a blog post format and then post it on our website. And then a week after that, we would natively post that video into social media with links back to our calls to action. So one piece of content posted 3 times. Shorts weren't as big back then. I probably should have gotten on shorts earlier, but it doesn't matter. If I were doing it today, the 4th week would be shorts from those videos, then chopped up and posted out and scheduled out over time. So one piece of content shared, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. But in doing so, I now had this repository of information that where we were doing at our height 17 inbound leads a day to our agency just from YouTube videos. That's not the stuff from our website or any other channel, just from people watching our YouTube videos. We were getting small business owners to reach out to us. And here is the beauty of creating content, specifically around education. Okay. And Alex Hormozi's actually created some videos about this too. So, I'm not the only one that thinks this, but he did this it's like an hour long. You can watch it if you want. The breakdown is entertaining content gets more eyeballs. Education content gets more sales, right? Like, entertainment is great, but I often don't buy stuff because I'm entertained. I buy stuff because I'm educated. So I created, the title of the video would be, what is commercial general liability, or the best general liability for a barbershop? Because when someone has a problem that they need fixed, they're not looking for entertainment. They're looking for the answer. So
those 17 leads that you were getting a day, were those organic, or did you amplify it with paid media?
Pay $1. We didn't spend. It wasn't until year 4 that we spent $1 on advertising.
So you were getting from putting video, and the average video would get what, like 200 views, or what was the reach of these?
I think the most, we had a couple that were close to 10,000, but most of them range between 200 and 700 views.
So I want to just highlight something. So you mentioned a couple of things. First of all, having a system for creating content. You talked about that 4-week system. People see companies making a lot of content and they think there's just a lot of noise going on. No, it's just a system. It's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of content that's getting chopped up 26 times, and that's how you get that volume. But the second thing you said makes a ton of sense. People associate content with things like fashion and gaming and travel and fun things. Oh, I want to make content if I'm in a fun industry. But if I'm in a boring industry, it doesn't make sense. Here's the luxury you have in a boring industry. Your competition all think that there's no reason to make content, right? Yes. When you make fashion content, you're competing with 14,000 other people making fashion content. When you're making content about general liability insurance, there's 3 people. And as you said before, 2 of them are over the age of 75 and don't have the camera skills. And here you are, this young guy who's great on camera. And so you are actually playing in a pool of 1. And so you have the ability to be the guy. So if you are listening now and you're in an industry where you maybe don't have something super sexy to talk about, awesome. Make content about it and be the only one doing it.
So there is a common misconception around people who shop online are people who go online that they're shoppers. They're shoppers. That is not the case. Nobody wants to call multiple service providers. Nobody. No one wakes up in the morning and goes, you know what, Jon? I think I'm going to call 6 plumbers today and figure out which one's the best one. Nope. You want to make one call, have that person know what they're talking about, and solve your plumbing problem that you have. Same thing with insurance, same thing with accounting, same thing with every single friggin' business everywhere, whether it's sexy or not sexy. Because when I have a problem, what I want is the problem solved. And if I can have that problem solved by calling one person, that is my preference. So let's say I'm an accountant and I'm sitting here and I do tax services and I'm listening to this podcast because I'm trying to grow my tax business. Well, so I know shit about taxes. I hate taxes. I'm terrible at them. And I outsource my taxes to a guy. And if I'm looking to find a tax professional and I go to 2 websites, one is a 7-page website with the same boring templated freaking content that doesn't tell me anything. And one has 300 pieces of content that break down the nuances of a tax form and what all the terms mean. I mean, literally, you could just take the balance sheet and do a video on each line item. What is accounts receivable on a balance sheet? What is on a balance sheet? What is on a balance sheet? Because you know what? A guy like me, I'm going to watch a couple of those. And if I can relate to you, if I look at you and I go, geez, Jon he seems to know what he's talking about. I'm going to call you. And when I call you, I'm already sold, right? So what I found out about those on average 17 leads that we were getting, they were already sold. All they needed was validation that we were who we said we were. That's it. That's all they needed. They didn't need to be sold. They didn't want to call anybody else. They weren't going to call anybody else. In the insurance industry, people bitch constantly about, oh, this person's also called 7 other people. And I'm like, you know why they've called 7 other people? Because they don't know who the fuck you are. You're just another random name that they found in a Google search and they're calling, right? But for us, for our agency, and the reason we were acquired after 2 years. So guys, 7 days before COVID, I launched as a single person shop, bootstrapped. I sold that agency 2 years later with 10 people to a PE company because people were calling us because they were already sold. Our close ratio was 82%. 82% on inbound leads. 82% close ratio. 82% on inbound leads because they already wanted to work with us because they had watched 2, 3, 4. One guy, who I have to assume is bananas, watched 30 of our videos before he called us. And what he said was, I need a general liability policy, a workers' comp policy, and a commercial umbrella for my contracting business. I have 2 employees. Here's how much money they make. Put it together. Send me the number. That's it. That's what he said. He had researched what he needed. He had learned from us exactly what he needed. He learned what information he needed to give us, gave us that information. We sent him a proposal. He signed it and sent us a check.
82%, for those of you who don't know, is an extraordinarily high close rate on inbound. I mean, if you were telling me 33%, I'd say that's pretty high. So, okay, I got to wrap this up with one note, because I just wrote this book, Marketing Superpowers, and there is something in here that you are nailing, and that is when people know you before they have a chance to speak with you, you have already sold them before you say one word. They walk in the door like you said. And I have this happen to me also. People know me from LinkedIn. I was at a conference last week. I was doing this keynote on stage. I had CMOs walking up to me afterwards who were ready to hand me a contract because what I said on stage was exactly what they needed. Right. And so this idea of a superpower, as I call it, a marketing superpower, is when people already know who you are because they've binged 17 or 30 videos, it's insane what a sales call looks like. Throw out all your sales books. You don't even need them. You become an order taker. Hey, let me sharpen my pencil so I can just write a few extra zeros for you. And that's what it sounds like you experienced.
Can I make just 2 quick points before we wrap up? 2 quick points. One, the number one piece of pushback I get on this idea, which I'm sure you do as well, is I'm not good on camera. Guys, particularly if you're in a nerdy business, I want my tax attorney to be nerdy as fuck. If you have a high energy personality and you're a tax attorney, that makes me nervous. So so you don't have to be great on camera. What people want is someone who's going to solve their problem. Just display your expertise and show that you care. That's it. You don't have to be dynamic. You don't have to have a crazy setup. I think your audio's, you have to have a baseline level of quality. But outside of that, like, just display your knowledge. You do not have to be some incredibly dynamic, outgoing person, like high energy. Just display your knowledge. And two, now I'm forgetting two, so it doesn't matter. But that's the big one. The big
It's
one
all
for
good,
me,
man. That
yeah,
point, I think, is gonna be the thing that gets a lot of people over the edge of that nervousness. Because you said it last night. I think you said this when I was on your podcast. People make up all kinds of excuses, all kinds of limiting belief. And the big one is, oh, I'm not good on camera. I don't make content. What you are actually telling yourself falsely is you don't have value to give. And
yeah.
if you're somebody who's been in a business for 5, 6, 7 years, I promise you have value to give. Just figure out a way, the confidence to get it out there.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Ryan, this was so good, man. I didn't get to any of my questions. We got to do this again. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
So if you're interested, my business now is executive coaching. So I help founders, entrepreneurs, business professionals kind of walk through and avoid a lot of these obstacles. You can go ryanhanley.com, check me out there. I also have a podcast which is all about independent thinking. So there's some entrepreneurial stuff, but it's more about, we interview people from all over the place, and that's called The Ryan Hanley Show. And you can find that wherever you listen or watch podcasts.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, appreciate it.